Hi, I'm John Kiriakou, and welcome back to DeProgram. I'm here today with Ted Rall, who's always great, and Ben Zinevich, who's also always great. Our friend Michelle Witte is off today. Lots to talk about, as there always is. We've got Vladimir Putin taking what appeared to be two different positions on the prospects of a ceasefire. It looks like he's come down on something. We have developments in Iran. They just received that letter from Donald Trump, and they rejected it outright. We have the Supreme Court coming up to a decision soon on birthright citizenship. We have another federal judge who just today said that Donald Trump's policy of just wantonly firing federal workers is not legal. And the former president of the Philippines, Duterte, was arrested by the International Criminal Court, bundled onto a plane, and sent to The Hague, where he is being charged with crimes against humanity. He deserves to be charged with crimes against humanity. I just never thought it would actually happen. But the big story today is about Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Columbia University student who was essentially abducted by immigration agents and is being held pending deportation. But can you legally deport somebody who is in the United States legally on a green card? That makes him a U.S. person. So he has the same rights as an American citizen. Ben, what do you know about this case?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following this throughout the week as it developed. Khalil, he was returning with his wife at 8:30 p.m. from a iftar after breaking fast. It is the holy month of Ramadan. And so they were returning into an apartment that is Columbia University housing, where an ICE officer followed them into their building, basically kind of shoved their way in behind them and immediately started interrogating him and declaring that his visa had been revoked. That obviously not true. It's sort of an immediately disprovable lie, considering the fact that he was, as you say, is a permanent resident in the possession of a green card, and has not been charged with a crime. That's the other thing is if we're going to consider this question of whether or not he belongs to be here, the only crime he committed was speaking out against a genocide, and so this is really enraged people around the country. I think that there's some possibly calculated aspect to this, considering that many schools are on spring break right now. So I think that it delayed an aspect of, similar to when the Kent State shootings occurred, the universities nationwide didn't completely explode, but the anger is obviously very palpable. I mean, there's a shift in how I think even the mainstream media is covering this. I think like I know Ted, you probably may have noticed this as well, but in reading between the lines in the New York Times, they're not calling these sort of like pro-Hamas terrorists. They're not dismissing these people as
Right.
whatever, these sort of terrorist sympathizers that the Palestinian movement is typically smeared with. They're saying, the streets of Manhattan are filled in solidarity with and so there's a sense that I think people have been waiting for some sort of resistance to these just unilateral, arbitrary, right-wing attacks from the Trump administration and from Congress and from the Department of Homeland Security. And this is it. And so I think this is where a major fight is already brewed. We even inside, it's not just in New York, there's been some demonstrations inside of Washington, D.C. And then I also saw yesterday evening, there was a smaller group that actually traveled to Jenna, Louisiana, to have this like super loud speaker just like directed at the detention facility, to just ensure that he Mahmoud Khalil probably has no idea outside of this that
Yeah.
there is a movement that has sort of taken to the streets for this. And so, being able to take it all the way there, I think speaks to some sort of touchstone that this act, which is by many means it seems illegal, has really provoked.
2 hours ago, 200 demonstrators who are members of a group that's now calling itself Jews for Peace took over the first floor of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in New York, chanting, screaming for Mahmoud Khalil to be released, all with signs. There were so many of them, and they so took security by surprise that there wasn't any attempt to remove them. The Washington Post has been covering the story like all the other major papers, and I think they've gotten it totally wrong. Like, for example, yesterday, the Post said on the front page that the only thing keeping Khalil in the United States is that Marco Rubio has not yet ordered him to be deported. And that's just simply not true.
Mhm.
He has legal rights, and he hasn't yet faced a single day in court. Like you said, Ben, he hasn't been charged with a crime. This is all about free speech. And even if the New York Times isn't smearing demonstrators who are supportive of Palestinian human rights, the mainstream media certainly is still trying to turn public opinion by calling him a pro-Hamas activist. He's
Yeah.
not pro-Hamas. He's never indicated that he's in any way pro-Hamas. He's just a supporter of human rights for Palestinians.
Mhm.
Not that being pro-Hamas is not covered by the First
It's not
Amendment.
a crime.
It's not a crime. Anyone's allowed to be. What's really interesting is that there's first of all, I want to just point out to sort of echo something that Ben pointed out. I do think we're at a turning point here.
Yeah.
The media was slow on the uptake here. It took about 48 to 72 hours for the editorial pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post to wake up and start responding to this.
Yes.
So clearly they're following, they're not leading. They can see that this is a different kind of moment, and this one's not likely to go away. Super interesting to me was the lack of a fig leaf here. I was expecting some sort of, he filled out his forms wrong. He misled when he filed for his green card. He misrepresented this or that. There's no allegations of this. To the contrary, Trump himself and the administration and Marco Rubio have said that this is about him being in favor of the people of Palestine. This is about speech, according to the government itself. And the level of bullying and thuggishness coming out of the administration is gobsmacking. The official X account used by the White House was used to send an obnoxious, snarky GIF of that said "Shalom Mahmoud" with a picture of him in an unpleasant, facial expression, looking ominous. I had little shades of the Time magazine cover of O.J. Simpson that was darkened to make him look more black. It was racist. It was disgusting. And clearly this is about, I don't think I think it's a feature, not a bug. I think the administration wants to send out this message. We're going to get you. And we're not even going to pretend. We're not even going to so they're relying apparently on this obscure McCarthy era 1952 statute that states that you can lose your green card in the event that you are somehow a problem, not for national security, but just for the national security interests of the United States. That can be anything. It's completely undefinable by a court. I think in the end, if this goes to the Supreme Court will probably invalidate that 1952 statute, which apparently has never been used before. It's just on the grounds that it's so vague that a court can't define it, and that's usually a reason for laws to be thrown out as unconstitutional.
Yeah.
May I add something on that too? There's a legal concept called desuetude. This is very niche in the legal community. I mentioned it to a retired federal judge one time, a circuit court of appeals judge, And she said, wow, desuetude. I have not heard that word since law school. But what it means is, and it's a little bit nebulous because it's never actually been defined, if there's a law in the books that has not been used in a long period of time, not further defined, it ceases to be a law. And so that's a place where he can legitimately press against his detention, his continued detention, because this law is so old. 1952, that was almost 3/4 of a century ago. And so if nobody has been prosecuted using this law, it's not a law.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a blue law about eating ice
like
cream
a blue
on
law.
Sundays
That's right.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Yeah, buying lottery tickets on like a Christian holiday. Like, yeah, no,
That's
I
right.
think I'm curious, Ted, as in a known alumnus of Columbia. I mean, it's also being reported that he actually reached out to Columbia administration for enhanced security. It seemed as though, he clearly, and yeah, I'm not saying this as if it's any news or breaking news that Columbia has been partisan on this issue in the last, 17, 18 months of this genocide. But I think it is pretty interesting how they're clearly acting on behalf of that $400 million that disappeared overnight from Trump.
Which they're probably never going to see again either. I mean, it's a great example of a institution kowtowing to the rich and powerful, and they're just suckers too. They're not going to get this back. They fired. I mean, I don't know what's enough for them. They fired their president. They expelled students. They fired professors. They threw professors under the bus in a McCarthyite-like congressional committee setting. And that's apparently not enough for the administration. Don't cry for Columbia. They've got a multi-billion-dollar endowment. They'll be fine. But,
same as Harvard.
So it's kind of like, whatever. But I mean, I think it's pretty sad that the university administration didn't see the poor optics of not standing up for their own. He's not even a student anymore. He's a graduate of their graduate school, of the School of International and Public Affairs. He just graduated in December. I mean, they didn't stand up for him. At the same time, other institutions that you would expect to have stood up, the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams, the governor, Kathy Hochul, both
Nobody
Democrats,
came to my defense. It's crazy.
Both Democrats, right? And this is a sanctuary city. And this is such a sanctuary city that Rudy Giuliani, when he was mayor of the city, did ads and interviews advertising New York as a sanctuary city. That's how popular that is here. It's never been controversial. I've never heard any New Yorker complain about it, even conservative ones. And so for the governor and the mayor to just say, well, we've got to be silent, we've got to like study this up. I mean, hell, even Bernie Sanders, he was asked about this yesterday, and he's like, oh, I'm working on it. I don't know. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for Khalil to die of old age? What are you worried? What's the rush, I guess? The guy's in jail. What are you doing?
No, I actually spoke with someone who is, local to Washington, D.C. They do a lot of, organizing in terms of going to Capitol Hill, approaching people saying like, hey, you voted X on this Y. Like, what, like, do you support the fact that we want to take control of Gaza, or that Trump wants to do X issue policy, and kind of getting them just on the record, because, it is your right to wander the halls of Congress, as much as, you don't really have much of an influence otherwise. But they approached Bernie Sanders, I believe it was yesterday, being like, isn't this concerning to you? And he said, I got a rally to attend to. Get out of my face, essentially. It was disgusting, honestly, the way that he treated these people. And this is a crime. Like, this is just so boldly an attempt to just set a very disturbing precedent.
It's an affront to the First Amendment.
And I think
I have to think that the Supreme Court is going to weigh in on this. I mean, this has got to be one of those 9-0 decisions where partisanship is set aside just because this is the executive branch abusing the separation of powers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it can have a non-dramatic ending. It either, has this sort of final relief in that regard, or it sets off, a similar sort of 1919 first Red Scare where we're deporting hundreds of people, just on
Palmer raids.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the thing is that they've just taken a huge shit on the Constitution here. And it is, it's gross to see so many people okay with it. As I pointed out to my friends, many of whom are supporters of Israel, if a power can be abused to go after your enemy, it can be abused to go after you when the political winds change.
That's right.
And they will. Someday, President of the United States is going to be pro-Palestine. Then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either that or there's no president of the United States. But yeah.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hell of a story. I mean, by the way, they didn't even give the guy access to an attorney, right?
No, they didn't.
They hung
he was
up,
never granted access to an attorney.
He was on the phone with his attorney and his legal representation at the scene, and the ICE agent, who actually was the same guy that Trump during the joint address, had him stand up and do his little he came to the country from the Dominican Republic legally, and he's now protecting our borders. That's who exactly actually was the one that abducted.
So he's a celebrity goon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he Mahmoud was on the phone with legal representation, and he just, hung up. He took his phone and hung up on behalf of him. So, this is really where we are. But it is, I think, in a certain respect, I do think that a major battle was won in the sense that they weren't able to just quietly deport him in a matter of 3 days. I think that probably could have been
Do you think they wanted to? I mean, I get the impression that they're spoiling for this fight. They had to know what's going to happen. I mean, he's an Ivy League graduate. I mean, he's high profile. It's in New York City. They grabbed him at what time of the day was it?
8:30 p.m. on a Saturday.
Right, so it's not exactly the dead of night. It's not 3 a.m.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that genuinely, I think there was a desire that they could.
Although they did screw up in one respect, they didn't know he had a green card.
Right.
And I'm like, what's the deal? You guys don't own computers over there at ICE?
Yeah. No, I think
you can't run his info and see.
There was it seems as though there's a deep reliance on maybe just bad intel or biased intel from Zionist contacts in Colombia. There's people like Shai Davidai and these people who have just long been sort of feeling as if they're under the pressure of a nonviolent encampment movement on campus. Meanwhile, of course, there's former IDF agents spraying skunk water, leading to hospitalization of some of these Gaza solidarity activists from last year. We saw that in January of 2024. And those people still have health complications. They still have skin related issues because they've been physically attacked. And you don't see any conversation about
the university doesn't care.
No, of course not.
And by the way, also the university in this whole thing, it's probably just it's of interest to people here in my neighborhood. They stole a city street. There's a city street that goes right through the Columbia University campus, west 116th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam. When the university built its campus, which runs from 114th to 120th Street, they specifically signed an agreement with the city of New York that said this will always be a public street. There are gates, but the gates are never closed. Those gates are always open. Members of the community have always been allowed to pass through there. It's really a hardship for people who live on the other side of campus trying to get to the subway to go all the way around. They're old people who live there. Ever since the encampment started last year, the university has locked those gates. They stole a city street. It's amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean it's the modern day fencing in movement of just taking the commons away. I'm sure that being an NYU alumni, I'm sure that they would dream of doing that for West Fourth. But it's
Washington Square Park.
Yeah, it's theirs now.
So moving on, what do you guys make of Vladimir Putin's what looks like a flip-flop on the idea of a 30-day ceasefire with Ukraine. At first, he said, absolutely not, there won't be a ceasefire. Then this morning, he said, well, I'm willing to take a look at a ceasefire. And then later in the day, he said, yeah, a ceasefire is a good idea, but we have a couple of points that we want to make. What's that mean? Does that mean we're going to have a ceasefire?
Yeah, we're going to have a ceasefire. I think the Russians want it. The Ukrainians obviously have been pressured into accepting it by the White House. And so, I think the Russian conditions will probably be things that Trump can agree to. This is a Russia's negotiating not with Ukraine, but with Trump. And
I think that's right.
And that's what's going on here. And I think, the Russians will have some, they'll say, like, we don't want you to keep shipping weapons during the ceasefire. That might, it's not an unreasonable request.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that this is something that they do want. It's, I think, a matter of how much will this be upheld. I mean, this isn't, the Palestinian resistance in Israel, where Israel can just, break every iteration or agreement. This has to be held up. And so it's
also, I don't think it's going to be like, constantly renewed.
Yeah.
This is going to be like once, the 30 days and that's it. And then we move to an armistice.
Yeah. And I think it was last week, there was the more, there was the airstrikes from Russia, and Trump was, being critical of that, which of course I think a lot of the Russiagators and the sort of establishment media was saying, oh, he's flip-flopping on this. And, I'm not defending him, but I agree with the position that this war needs to end. And, whether or not he actually wants that to be the case, whether or not, I think that he has different desires, and I'm not saying he's, a peacenik by any regards, but I do think that ultimately he's a part of a different ruling class faction that wants to have a direct fight with China. And there's two wings of it. There's people who think that they need to break the back of Russia first to go and attack China. Some people say, we don't have time. We have to go. We have to invade China when we can. So, I think, and those positions, I think, are constantly changing, are in flux. So, ultimately, I don't, we would all be in unison to say that the Russiagate, he's not, this Moscow candidate. He's not this Manchurian candidate by any standard. But I think that he's simply reacting to the desire that, a core part of the Washington consensus is, admitting finally that this war was such a waste and a true crime, considering that, probably 1 million people have died at this point, hundreds of thousands, if not. And, it's destroyed a country. It's created a dictatorship under Zelensky, with the banning of labor unions, with the banning of media outlets, with the banning of oppositional political parties, the suspension of elections. This is a shame.
The church,
and it's a crime. And then you say that side is the side for democracy. It's just it's going to affect Ukraine for decades, if not a century onward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%.
Trump made a statement too today. He welcomed the new head of NATO to the White House, and it was kind of a gross love fest while they were sitting there in front of the media. Saying things like, you're the best. Stoltenberg was good. The guy before him, I didn't like him. He wasn't so good. I don't even remember his name, but Stoltenberg was good, and you're even better than Stoltenberg. What kind of dialogue? Anyway, Trump got onto the subject of Russia and said that this is the beginning of the end of the war, and it's because of him. Because he jumped in and started barking orders and pointing fingers, the war is going to be over. Friends of mine, pro-Russian friends of mine, think 2 weeks, it's done. I think that's silly. And I think it's going to be more complicated. But one of the things that Trump said, and he said it just in plain English, Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. Period. It will not.
Good.
Yeah. And I have to say, I think I agree with him. I don't see a scenario where Ukraine becomes a NATO member. European Union, sure, I think they will be.
Well,
But
President
not
Putin,
NATO.
Putin has said,
He
EU,
doesn't have a
I'm
problem
all
with that.
about it. Do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There was a reporter from Just the News who asked a question that I thought was interesting, asking if it was possible for the Russians and the Ukrainians to have a complementary, healthy joint economy. Now, Trump doesn't understand economics, but he said yes. And I think that's why he supports Ukraine's quick accession into the European Union. I'm not sure what else he expects. Hey, and we're also not seeing any real movement on sanctions yet. And I wonder if I'm just being impatient or if this is an issue. Remember, a week ago, Trump ordered the Treasury Department to not enforce sanctions on Russian banks, which we all thought was the beginning of the end for sanctions. And then Visa and MasterCard, within a day, began doing business in Russia again. But then there's been nothing in like 10 days. What's that all about?
Well, sanctions are a hodgepodge, right?
Yeah.
They're put into place by different departments of the government. They're not put into place all at once. You remember when the invasion took place, it was like, well, we're slapping these sanctions, but wait, there's more, like the Ginsu knife commercial, over and over and over. I mean, even fairly recently, I heard, I don't know, was it Lindsey Graham saying like, oh, we've got even more sanctions, bone crushing sanctions on that we could slap on Russia. Well, we'll give them all the sanctions. So I feel like it's almost like there's probably no single list. It's not like there's a magic button that the president could sign an executive order and just say,
sure,
abolish all, but I don't think he's inclined to do that.
No.
I don't think he wants his signature on a document that says I'm wiping out sanctions on Russia. I think it's more like a la carte, find out about them, maybe as the Russians bring them up in talks, like, hey, this particular thing you did, can you unwind that? And then apparently they're a lot easier to impose than they are to roll back.
Mm-hmm.
I never understood that. I never understood
either.
Because some of them are so simple and so silly as, the deputy, the Russian deputy defense minister is not allowed to have a checking account in an American bank. That's a sanction. I remember when I first got to the CIA, and I didn't really have a sense of what sanctions really were. I just thought about big picture sanctions, like you can't trade with Iran. And then we would get lists of new sanctions or proposed sanctions for comment. And I remember thinking, these are sanctions? These aren't going to hurt anybody. Why even single out individuals?
Mm-hmm.
That so-and-so can't have a bank account and so-and-so can't
someone who might never
LLC.
come to the United States anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
and has no assets in the United States.
Well, I think that those came about almost as a response to public disapproval and realization that at the end of the day, they hurt the people that they affect rather than, the government. I think like the Magnitsky era was a product of the fact that people were waking up to the, reality that's like, okay, Venezuela, you sanctioned, but you're not harming the strength of the government. You're not able to actually sway anything. Iraq didn't fall because of sanctions. Iraq fell because of a shock and awe invasion. And ultimately what happens is that 500,000 children in Iraq starved. In Venezuela, there's 40, or in 2017, 2018, I think it was the Center for Economic Progress Research, found that 40,000 people died due to the sanctions effects, due to, inability to reach medicine, malnourishment, what have you. So I think the jury's out on, or the jury's not out on that, in the sense that people know that these are just a waste of time. If anything, it's brought gas prices up. And
now they're going to replace the government in Cuba anytime.
Any day
anytime.
now.
Yeah.
Any day
Just
now.
hold your breath.
Yeah, it's like that Gordon Chung, who said, like, you Google his name and every article that he's written is, every year he has a new article that says tomorrow or next week or next year the Communist Party of China will fall. So I think that it's mainly due to that, but it's they're not actually they need like almost an expiration date if you're going to actually
Sure.
implement these or something. But
The hard ones are the stealing ones, though, right? Where they expropriate the assets of
yeah,
Russian oligarchs
Yeah.
and
the
stuff
theft
like
of
that.
gold of
Bruce
Venezuela.
Fine.
They don't
Bruce
want to give
Fine
money
has,
back.
No, Bruce Fine has written about that. That is illegal, but it's never been challenged in an American court. You can't just take somebody's stuff because
Unless you're the police.
You think, yeah, unless you're the police, because you think you're not going to like their politics.
Mhm.
You know, how many oligarchs' yachts have been seized? There's been no due process. There's been no court order to seize this person's assets just because they may support Vladimir Putin. Come on, that's against the law.
The problem is that, like, the thing is, something can be illegal, but how do you enforce it? You have to enforce it in a court. You have to hire a lawyer, and suing the government's almost impossible because they have a bottomless pit of pockets. The money is
right.
Money's no issue for them. They can go forever. Even if you're if you're an oligarch, you're poor compared to your adversary.
Yeah.
No,
it's true.
The theft of Citgo is still existing. The
Citgo's a good example.
And the fact that they were trying to hand it over to Juan Guaido as just basically private property of himself.
That's insane.
The diplomatic properties that existed in Washington, D.C. are still seized. They were stolen outright. It's just a hollow building in Georgetown, the former embassy of Venezuela, and who benefits from that? The hundreds of thousands of immigrants that I'm not actually going to go on record and say how many because I don't remember the exact number, but the many immigrants from Venezuela have no
no consular
services. They can't get any sort of, and that matters. And so it's just it's a theft that, again, it just punishes the people. And I don't see how it can, bring people to the side of the Yankee ideal.
I was in the embassy the night that it closed. I was one of the speakers that night, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people protesting outside. There were people inside who were, trying to outweight the authorities, and there were even FBI agents just letting themselves in while we were still inside. It wasn't midnight yet, and the Venezuelans hadn't closed the embassy, and these FBI guys are just walking right in like they own the place. But anyway, I gave my speech. Those of us who were leaving left, and on the way out, I passed two uniformed Secret Service agents, and one of them said, "Tell me again whose side we're on." And the other one said,
"That's awesome."
Yeah. The other one said, "The ones out here are with us. The ones inside are with Putin."
Oh, man.
And I was like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. But yeah.
Secret Service political education. Yeah.
Yep.
Which side are we on, indeed?
Yeah.
Profound.
Hey, and I wanted to talk about Iran for a little while, too. I've said many times, I said on the show the other day that I have a close friend who is back and forth to and from Iran. She just got back from Iran a week ago, not even a full week ago, and she says that the situation on the ground is not what we're reading about here. Now, we know that Donald Trump sent this letter through an Emirati diplomat, the deputy foreign minister, to President Pezeshkian and Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and we don't know what the letter said. It was probably a threat. And the Iranians rejected it outright. I'm told, and I spoke to Mohammed Marandi about this just recently, I'm told that the Iranian government have no interest in talks with the United States. And they come right out and say, look, the Libyans talked to you, and look what ended up happening to the Libyans. The Syrians talked to you, and look what happened to the Syrians. And now you want us to talk to you? We're not interested in talking. Another thing that I've heard from both of these sources is that the average rank and file Iranian is 100% with the government on this issue. They are not interested in new talks with the United States. They trusted the United States to enter into the JCPOA. We unilaterally withdrew. What they are preparing for is military action. They really believe that the United States, under Donald Trump, is going to attack them. And I keep saying, and I will admit to you, I have a problem with um, over optimism, I guess I'll say, or baseless optimism. I've been saying, just like only Nixon could go to China in the 70s, only Trump could go to Iran, not literally to Iran, but you know what I mean, could enter into talks with the Iranians in this decade. And maybe I'm just wrong. Ted, you and I had a chat on the show last time where we talked about Donald Trump's desire to win a Nobel Peace Prize. He's almost obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I take that seriously. But would it make more sense to attack Iran first and then offer an olive branch? Do you see the United States attacking Iran?
I think it would be madness, and
I do too.
I think that even with Marco Rubio at the table and other neocons,
yeah, he's a hardcore anti-Iran guy.
Even so, I've got to think that the advice around the table from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the NSC would be, don't do it. Iran's, as I always like to put it, they're a real country. They have a real military. They it's not like Afghanistan where you just sort of go and they're gone, right? I mean, they're not really gone, but militarily you can dominate. That's not going to be the case. I mean, the bloodshed's going to be terrible. A lot of Americans would be coming home in body bags. No, I think the Iranians have reason to be paranoid. I think, but what their real concern ought to be is the Israelis. Those are the people who have it out for them. I think Trump wants to. He wanted to talk to the Iranians last time.
Yeah, he did,
and it didn't really happen. I'm not. Things sort of fell apart there, and there's a lot of different reports there. I just don't think it's gonna. I think that he would like to make peace there. I think that anybody who's I think Iran is in many ways a key linchpin to the Israel-Palestine problem. There's really no peace deal. There's no Camp David II in a way without Iran. There's no Nobel Prize nomination without Iran. If you can't attack Iran first and then to try to get a peace deal. I mean, I know. Kissinger did it in 72.
Yeah, yes, he did. That's exactly what he did.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he did.
Yeah,
I have to agree. I'm sorry, Ben, to interrupt you.
No, please.
I think after the limited success that he had with Kim Jong-un in the first term, I think he learned some lessons, and I think he's serious about trying to draw the Iranians out. And I also agree, Ted, that if there's going to be an attack on Iran, it's going to be an Israeli attack on Iran. They've been spoiling for it for decades.
Not to mention the Iran, Trump has some goodwill gestures that he can give the Iranians. Speaking of sanctions, right? He could lift some sanctions. The Iranians would love that. That would be meaningful to them. It would. And as you know, temperamentally, we should be friends with Iran. I mean, they're like exactly the same as us. I mean, you know what I mean? When you meet Iranians,
they're awesome.
They vibe the same as we do. Same sense of humor. Same. They're really so similar. It's actually startling.
I'm curious also, John, what you make of the Khaliji sort of like the Gulf interest here, because I think that is always sort of maybe muted. I mean, since I guess 2 years ago or a year ago, where there seemed to be a sort of Chinese-led rapprochement between the Saudis and the Iranians, it seems like that's sort of taken a back seat, and also with the sort of war, genocide, last 17, 18 months that have led to just a stirring up in the foci of Gaza. Like, there's been a lot of other factors that have sort of put the proxies, at least, or whatever, you could say Israel as a proxy. I think that there's varying levels of autonomy, but I do think largely people are acting in their own self-interest, such as I'm saying that Hezbollah is not a Tehran operation. Like it's built itself indigenously in southern Lebanon, in the same way that the Ansar Allah movement has, in the same way that there's alliances for sure, but it's not a puppet, whatever. Certainly not in the same respect as, the Israel is to the United States, where, if we
Right.
cut funding, Israel would collapse militarily in a matter of days. So
Yeah.
I'm curious also just with the fact that we have seen the departure of us of Bashar al-Assad. We've seen the liquidation of uh, you know leading Hamas members, leading Hezbollah members. The Gulf of Aden is now flowing
Mhm.
again.
Yep.
So what I guess where are the Saudis looking in this?
I think that the this is a new Saudi Arabia under um, Mohammed bin Salman.
Mhm.
But before we talk about Saudi Arabia, I was a little surprised that it was the Emirati deputy foreign minister that delivered this message. Surprised because we are usually in lockstep with the Emiratis and the Saudis on Iran. But this Chinese led rapprochement did something. It was a setback for us. And so, where even 5 years ago, you would have only expected the Qataris, the Omanis, or the Algerians to deliver a message like that. Now it's the Emirati deputy foreign minister, and he's doing it in public. So the world is changing. Um, I think that the Saudis are now saying out loud what used to be said in private, that this notion of a special relationship with the United States is bullshit and that we've just been pretending for all these years. I worked for an ambassador in Bahrain who used to say all the time that the relationship is very simple. We sell them weapons and they sell us oil, and that's it. We don't even like each other, but
No,
we buy their stuff and
we're
they buy our
frenemies.
stuff. We're frenemies. Yeah. Well, now people are saying that out loud, and it's given the Saudis an opening to do business with the Chinese and the Russians and to have diplomatic relations with the Iranians that they just didn't have the guts to do before. Like I say, I'm surprised that it was an Emirati, but we
Mhm.
should take a lesson from that.
Yeah. If you do that with the Iranians and the Contras, though, and then
Yeah, right.
that's a different formula for some reason.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, I wanted to switch, if we could, to some domestic issues. Ted, you brought this up just before we started recording. The Supreme Court is going to have to hear this case on birthright citizenship. Again,
Mhm.
I spoke to Bruce Fine about this. Bruce, of course, was a regular guest on our Sputnik show. He's one of the country's leading constitutional scholars, and he said almost exactly what you said before we started recording, Ted, that this is going to be a 9-0 Supreme Court vote. It's something that the court is going to have to do now that there is a presidential attack on birthright citizenship. Um, you see it going in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think very clearly the administration is spoiling for fights. They're searching for their limits. They're like a teenager or a puppy that's just trying to figure out what they can get away with and trust. And they're throwing everything at the wall. And it's interesting to me because I think they're going to find their limits and they might not like them. And
Mm-hmm.
this will be one of those cases. I mean, um, look, birthright citizenship is settled Supreme Court case law,
Settled. Yes.
and I mean, I know obviously we know from Dobbs that settled law isn't always settled, but still, I think this is not going to be a deviation from stare decisis, right? I mean, this is going to just keep go. This is going to stay in place. It's going to be 9-0. I think the Supreme Court's going to be able to, you know, hash this one out in about 20 minutes over bagels before breakfast, and
Yeah.
then they're done. I don't think there's anything really for any of them to talk about or think about. It's like it's
Yeah.
just wishful thinking. It's red meat for the base. But this
Yeah.
is, I
He can at
mean,
least say, I tried. I tried to
exactly.
keep them out. I failed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this is really about.
Yeah. You agree, Ben?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that generally we're seeing something similar to, I guess, the beginnings of the Reagan era, where people are essentially saying, why can't we break the backs of
Right.
the unions? Why can't
Right.
we roll back any sort of New Deal era, Great Society era reform that was demanded by, mass movements in a way.
Mm-hmm.
None of these things were, FDR woke up one day and said, I think I'll give people Social Security. I think I'll
Yeah,
make sure that there's, a Department of Housing. Certainly not Nixon
right,
was saying, I think that we'll construct a Clean Water Act.
right.
These were, of course, demanded by a movement that sought influence. And I think that, you know, there's something to be said about a difference between desire of influence and power in politics. And I think that Trump is unique in a way because I think in American politics we're very used to just acceding to whatever influence, and there's not people who are very powerful. It's just that people kind of go along. There's people that are just simply looking for, the write-offs, the ability to live, to live in DC, the ability to have, your nice little row house in Georgetown. But there's people that are very few trying to accede power, and I think that Trump lucked out in finding the right billionaires, willing to just kind of keep this movement moving in terms of, going on full offense in all of these realms. I think that when we saw the attacks on Roe v. Wade, I think that that was a sign that, they'll go after Brown v. Board. They'll go after anything that they need to, because at the end of the day, that there's profits to be made.
Sullivan versus New York Times looks like one of
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
I won't cry, actually.
yeah. I have to agree with you. So this federal judge today ruled that Trump can't just wantonly and arbitrarily fire all these government workers. So that is coming to a screeching halt. And I'm going to add, there was a piece in the Washington Post yesterday or the day before about 4,500 government-owned works of art, some of them masterpieces dating from the Civil War era to the present, that have nobody to care for them now. Literally everybody in the General Services Administration who works on the government art collection has been fired. So these paintings that we see in historic post offices, the sculptures in front of government buildings, including a 30-foot tall stabile by Alexander Calder in Chicago, everything is just done. We don't know. And there was an interview with an art restorer, and he was like, "Whoa, wait a minute. I've been working on restoring this Civil War painting. Now I'm calling GSA, and nobody picks up because they've all been fired. Jesus. They owe me $100,000 for the work I've done so far. Am I going to get paid? And even if I do get paid, who do I send the painting to if everybody's been fired?" But this is what happens when Elon Musk is in charge.
Well, I'm curious what you all think of how much runway Elon has left. I mean, I'm of two minds. I think that, he's doing the bidding of a certain class, as I said, is dedicated to just tearing up Social Security, healthcare, the working class jobs that a public sector has provided for millions of people, as well as veterans, of course. I think that's the postal service is the largest employer of veterans in America.
That's right.
And they're just laughing at it. But so I am curious. There is he's doing his job, but that being said, he is a completely polarizing figure. They could do this just under the darkness of just a funding bill.
Reduction in service, reduction in force.
So I mean, there's rumors that he's like, I don't have to question it. He's annoying. He's obnoxious. Like he's a weird guy socially. And so I'm just kind of curious do you think he'll just take the fall and then, people will seem like, at least he's not the bad guy.
He did say he was gonna leave after 6 months. Now, granted, it's only been 2 months, not even quite 2 months, but he would be gone after 6. I did notice that this week, for the very first time, Republicans on Capitol Hill began criticizing him by name in public. That's new. And I'm thinking,
however,
the
Democrats are about to give Musk and the Republicans, a massive gift. And you know what I'm going to
Yes.
say.
Oh my God. Yes. Go
So the
ahead.
Democrats are pushing for the most ill-timed government shutdown of all time. And what they're going to do. So in 3 months, when your social security check has been months late, your tax refund is months late, you take your kid to the national park and the gate is closed. It's the Republicans are going to be able to say, well, the Democrats shut down the government. If they hadn't done that, they could have laid it all at the feet of Doge and Musk.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's a stupid, stupid mistake. Because listen, historically, every government shutdown has been because of Republicans.
Yes.
And public opinion always turns against the Republicans when the government closes. And now Chuck Schumer said yesterday, well, we've decided, we're going to shut it down this time. Only one Democrat has come out and said he's going to vote with Republicans. Friggin' Fetterman.
Yeah, the nut.
Who's on my shit list for the last, 2 years now. He is a nut. But otherwise, they need 60 votes. The Republicans need 60 votes to break cloture and actually get the thing to the floor for a vote.
They're 7 short. I guess they're 6 short now.
Yeah, 6 short. Exactly.
And it's as usual, the Democrats are fighting the last war. This might have been a good move, under different circumstances, but not in March 2025.
That's right.
Now, I'm not really a big fan of this advice, but he's more right than wrong, Carville, when he's advising the Democrats to just sort of stay out of the way and let the Republicans fuck up. It's mean to all the people who are suffering. It's not nice to Mahmoud Khalil,
right?
But it's not nice to the people of Gaza. But it would be smart domestic politics.
I think if you understand the Democrats, it is probably more likely that good will come out of just letting a sort of independent, national response, fight back against the Republicans than them providing some sort of means tested milk toast, B option. I think that, the sad part of this is really just, it's either forced austerity by the Republicans or a complete shutdown of the public sector. And so, there's
it'll just
obviously
be hobbling. It's going to be like, look after they fired. John, you and I are both old enough. If you flew after the Reagan fired the PATCO air traffic controllers,
oh my God, I remember that
in the 80s.
Yesterday,
every flight was hours late. You missed every connection for years. It was like you didn't really buy a plane ticket. It was like a raffle where you had a chance at flying. And it didn't get fixed for 15 years.
It's true.
And that's what it's going to be like. It's just going to be the country circling the drain.
Hey, and speaking of milk toast, did you guys happen to see that Rahm Emanuel, of all people, said he's running for president?
What?
I saw, speaking of milk toast.
Someone who's about as popular as Elon Musk.
I know.
I saw that for some reason it said that Pete Buttigieg has denied running for Michigan, which I don't know if you all have context.
Well, he didn't deny it. He's not going to do it.
Which infers that he may run for president on the stellar record of
bank.
100%.
I think he's the man to beat.
Vote for him.
He's the man to beat for the nomination, not necessarily to win. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think he'll be formidable.
I would say that that's probably true. I can't imagine the debate stage in that regard. But he's just, he's a total clown, and I've interacted personally with people who work directly with his Department of Transportation, and they're just so delusional. They really think, and you just say well, shouldn't there be some sort of overhaul in terms of just making sure that planes or trains don't, collapse or crash or collide? And, why is it that we're the only country where this happens? Why is it that a bridge just, it's not 100% guaranteed that you can get on the other side of a bridge without it collapsing? We have the
adds
money.
To the excitement of the commute.
And that, especially if you're driving a Tesla. But I think that if you're continually just having this question. And you gotta, I don't know, you go to any other country, if you're driving around in like Europe, it's like the roads are actually just paved. The like these things are just, and it just made no sense. And they were
Well,
like,
except for Italy, but I'll give you the rest.
well,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. But you know, in northern European areas where the wealth is more concentrated. But it just makes zero sense. And you know, there's a continued blame of the Republicans. They claim that they're for infrastructure, they're whatever, but it's just nobody wants to build anything these days.
Yeah.
Although that used to be, right? The conventional wisdom was that's where the bipartisanship is.
Exactly. Yeah. That
I
was
mean,
the
and
only
there
thing
was
that
a
right.
could
little
pass.
bit. It's the only thing that Biden really accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and
So
there
Yeah,
was,
it's true.
I guess people figure, well, you know, we did about 10% of what we were supposed to do, and that's
yeah.
a for America, that's a win.
Exactly. I mean, it's a question that revolves around. I mean, that's the thing is our sort of financial imagination in this country is usually in the hundreds of millions when it's really a matter of trillions. It's the numbers that you talk about when you're giving money to Ukraine. That's how much it's going to require for us to completely renovate our housing, our like just consider it a war. Like consider it, I mean, the people would joke about it
Mhm.
in the sense of like, you know, let's just have a war on climate. Let's have a
Hmm.
war on infrastructure. Let's have a war on whatever, because we're totally fine saying, of course, and this is cliche at this point, especially among our circles, like, why is it that, you know, you never ask who's going to pay for that when the Pentagon just can't audit itself,
Right.
or it can't do any sort of, you know, tightening of the purse. But you know, that's just what countries do these days. And like, you know, the China builds all of this railway, doesn't blink an eye because it's, you know,
No problem. It's a
what
national priority.
well, what's the government for otherwise? Like
Right. Well,
that's
I
like,
mean, but like, you know, I'm really interested in the fact that you're even having this discussion about infrastructure related to Buttigieg's presidential aspirations, because the implication is that when we consider a political candidate who has served who has served in public office, that we would evaluate his or her you know, performance, and and that would go into the calculus to determine whether or not they should be elevated to the presidency. But we know that's not actually true, right? I
mhm.
mean, nobody really does that. Nobody really looked at Senator Biden's you know, record when they were, or as vice president when they were considering whether to vote for him in 2020.
That's right.
Nobody really looked at, you know, very few people looked at Kamala Harris and said, oh, you know, what kind of AG was she? You know, how was she
Yeah.
as DA in San Francisco? If you looked into it, it wasn't very impressive. You know, Obama's number one selling point was that he was for the smart war against Afghanistan, not the dumb war against Iraq. And then when you scratch the surface, if you did, you found that when he was senator, there were only 6 times that he could vote on Iraq war funding. He voted for all 6. It was just bullshit. And
Yeah.
like, but nobody checks. So I think with Buttigieg, no one's going to go back and see, you know, let's give him a hard time over Palestine, Ohio. East Palestine, the Republicans will try, but it won't work. I mean, it's going to boil down to, you know, do we like the way he talks? Do we like his looks? Are we okay with the fact that he's gay? That's it. That's going to be the
Mhm.
entire question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How many
that's it.
black people died in South Bend under his watch?
Yeah.
That's something that
Right.
nobody likes to bring up, but
Oh,
Or
it's
the fact
yeah,
that he was not in charge of a single bus when he
yeah.
was the mayor of South Bend.
No, and I mean, what? He's like a history major from Harvard. Like
Hey,
he's
hey,
like,
hey! I'm a history major.
well, you're not trying to be president, but maybe you
Wait,
are.
maybe just wait.
Just wait. There's 4 more years.
Yeah,
But no, I think it's just, if not that, at least perhaps a vision. I mean,
he's going to
Bernie,
be like he's an Obama model. That's why I
yeah,
think Buttigieg has a strong. You know, he's very calm, methodical, articulate. And after Donald Trump, Americans are going to be in the mood for someone like that. They're going to want Spock again.
yeah. I mean, and
yeah.
they didn't have that with even Biden was able to squeak out with that. I mean,
Mhm.
the fact that he was already, you know, decrepit and demented,
Well,
and they,
he basically was like, you know, I rubbed some of Obama's shine, his magic, you know, sprinkles like sparkles landed on me He coasted off that. That's why the entire South voted for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean it would I don't think anybody's done this yet, but now we can is like thoroughly analyze whether or not the Biden administration um aligned more with the first Trump administration or with the Obama administration. And I think I would go on a limb and say that he largely just kept everything kind of running,
He kept
keeping
Space
the seat
Force. I
warm
thought
for
he was going to
Trump.
get rid of Space Force. He didn't.
He
Yeah.
did not.
He renamed there's the Thule Air Force Base or Space Base in Greenland. We do have a bit of territory in Greenland.
Mhm.
It was called Thule, which actually was strangely, that's the name of the secret society that the National Socialist Party in Germany based it off of, because of Thule was like the Nordic land that all the Aryans originated from. They renamed it to something else, which makes it seem kind of like, I think you're protesting a little too much of this. So you're kind of giving away like the reference here. So I don't know, maybe Trump will just send it back, return to its Aryan roots.
I mean, we're going to know a lot more about Joe Biden in about a week or two
With
when
the book.
Jake Tapper's book comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
right. That's right. I'm actually looking forward to that book.
Me
Hey,
too.
before we leave, we have to say something about former Philippine President Duterte. Uh, Several things have shocked me about this. He was arrested on an international criminal court warrant for crimes against humanity. He was arrested at his home in the Philippines. So it was the Philippine government, Filipino authorities that turned him right over. He was bundled onto a plane, flown directly to the Netherlands, and is now in prison in The Hague, awaiting trial on crimes against humanity. He's 78 years old, and he faces life without parole. I have to say, I'm very pleasantly shocked that this has happened. This is a guy who campaigned on the notion that he would just order the police to begin shooting drug dealers and drug users. And then when he got elected, did exactly that.
Legalized
Tens
murder.
of thousands, legalized murder. Tens of thousands of people were murdered in the streets just because the cops wanted to kill them because Duterte told them to. And now he's going to pay the piper. I'm really shocked by this.
I wonder if he's in Milosevic's old cell.
I said that last night to a friend of mine. How many cells could there possibly be in The Hague? A
Good
couple.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think he's probably in Milosevic's cell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does speak to the elephant in the room of there's someone else that is on a warrant.
Yes, there is.
And why can't they just grab him? Why can't
That's
they
right.
nab him in his, home country?
Nobody has the guts.
Yeah.
Nobody has the guts. Anyway, a case to watch. So we've taken about a little more than an hour.
You think our
Wrapping it up.
deprogramming is
I
complete?
feel completely deprogrammed.
I'm so
Yes.
totally deprogrammed.
Yeah, I am
Until
too.
next
Well,
week when we're inundated
right.
with more.
We'll be
Rejuvenated.
reprogrammed over the weekend.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, Ted Rall, Ben Zinevich, I'm John Kiriakou. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace.